Welcome to Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today it is my absolute honor to have Luis Diez with us.
Here's a story of a fundraiser who was launching his very own web show. Each episode is very short due to edits, so it can really flow. Here's a story of a podcast guest star who was busy raising money of their own. They were each great in their own way, fundraising in his own. Till the one day when Jack asked a guest to join him, and they knew it was much more than a jest, that these guests must somehow form a resource. That's the way they all became the podcast guests. The podcast guests, the podcast guests. That's the way they became the podcast guests.
Luis advises nonprofits in annual fund development, digital fundraising, and engagement strategies. He's the founder of the Donor Participation Project and the Annual Fund Toolkit. Previously, he taught at the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, was executive director of annual giving at Muhlenberg College, and director of the annual fund and development business operations at the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. In those roles, he led teams that created growth in number of donors and dollars raised through a model he calls the Sustainable Revenue Engine. Of varied interests, Luis holds an MBA and a PhD in business admin from Universidad Rey Juan Carlos in Spain, and an MM in music performance from the University of Tennessee. His thesis applied neural networks to predict economic performance indicators. He's also published articles on the investment value of musical instruments, edited peer-reviewed papers exploring applications for economic theories of legitimacy, and been featured in the music business section of the College Music Society's journal. Wow, that is quite the resume.
So just 2 months school, essentially.
So many fundraising professionals didn't start their careers in fundraising. Often they kind of fell into it. How did you get your start in the fundraising world?
Yes, I fell into it as well. I was doing internships, and I had this internship where I was essentially moving music stands around and serving coffee to the musicians. And I thought, hey, those people over there in development seem to be having all the fun. And then I kind of just started networking my way into my first position, where I was an admin with a PhD. And one thing led to another.
Wow. Well, so often how we look at philanthropy today is based on how we looked at philanthropy growing up. And how was philanthropy spoken around your dinner table?
Philanthropy, it's funny, I grew up in a country where philanthropy is not really part of the culture. So, in general Europe, other than the UK, most likely, although that is changing, but the view is that the government should take care of lots of things. So, I'm kind of an outsider to philanthropy. Maybe that, gave me a different perspective.
Yeah. So are you talking philanthropy just on the donation side or also on the volunteer side?
Well, philanthropy is love of humanity. So I was speaking narrowly about the financial part.
Right. So where you grow up, in the European culture, do folks volunteer at different places, or is that also not necessarily part of the culture?
I think volunteers, I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I'm just speaking from like my limited experience. So yeah, volunteering is fairly, commonplace, although the trend, I think this is a worldwide trend, is fewer and fewer people volunteering, participating in civic life. We could talk for hours about whether this is Facebook's fault or something else. But I think that's pretty, global trend. And that kind of is part of the work that I've done, where like people ask me, do you work with this particular sector, or this country, that country, or this group of people, or that group of people? How do we engage these types of people? Well, I find it much more interesting to think of like what's in common. I mean, okay, well, humans. What do humans need to believe in something or to engage with something? And a lot of the time, the root causes for people not giving is they don't feel valued and seen. And and then how do we engage this group of people so they can make gifts? Well, just make them feel valued and seen. I mean, it's not rocket science. You're just not doing it. You're just kind of showing up with a gift officer at the door.
Right.
And then saying they're not philanthropic. Well, I mean, for Pete's sake. I went on a ramble here.
No. I quite appreciate it. So tell me about this donor participation project and what it's about and what you're hoping to accomplish with it.
Donor participation project. It's an online community. Essentially, it's a meetup. We get together every month, have a call with somebody interesting, have a good conversation. And between those meetly calls, there's a newsletter, and there was a podcast for a while. I don't have your longevity, Jack. And we will do smaller groups, peer groups. We're doing small in-person meetings. But the main thing is we get together. The idea is to co-create solutions that increase donor participation. So there's people doing good stuff all around the sector. It's just, how they say, like, the future's already here. It's like all over the place, like little bits of the future. So we're trying to bring all those people together and spread the knowledge, essentially come to analyze, learn about it, and spread it.
So talk to me about the average participant in the group. Are they new to fundraising? Are they mid-career? Are they seasoned vets? Kind of who are the people that make it out?
All type, everybody's welcome. So there's no cost to join. We kind of have the philosophy that new ideas, which is what we need, are going to come from the person that comes from an org that is kind of a nonprofit, but not really, or a new career person. But we also have VPs, CEOs, executive directors. So it really does run the gamut. And that's been one of the really interesting and valuable things of the group, is that you get ideas from all types of organizations. So,
you have a great music background, and I always use the adage that anyone in the orchestra can lead.
There you go.
You don't need to be the conductor, right? So that's
or
always
leading
been
from behind, which is a thing lots of fundraisers do, right? So you're trying to like lead your executive director into doing the right thing without telling them what to do. Hard.
Right. So, you obviously have a strong background in data and things of that sort. And I maintain that, kind of the truth is your friend. So what data or goals should boards and bosses be looking at that they're really not looking at today?
Number one predictor of loyalty or strength of relationship with a nonprofit, in a study from a firm called RKD, they're really smart people, was not transparency. It was, it was actually feeling valued and seen. So are we are we doing things that lead to that, essentially? And then are we asking? So some of it is just like squishy. It's all the things that come before giving. So what I think has happened a little bit is the social compact, the social norms around philanthropy have eroded. Well, you might have said changed, in a good way. So which means that we have to pay more attention to, like, in our little community of people that we have, what are the social norms, and spend more time engaging people, doing things that you might not consider philanthropy, but that create philanthropy. And I don't know that there's a good way around that, Jack, that it's just more time. And before, you didn't have to spend time. I was speaking with a VP that works with our agency, Annual Fund Toolkit, from time to time. And he was saying in the 90s, you showed up at a board meeting and said, we need to get this done. And people would respond, how much do you need? And pull out their checkbooks. Now you say, we need to get this done. And they say, well, what about this other thing that I care more about? And why is it that you need to get that thing done? So, what should board? I think boards should just be more aware that there needs to be time and effort spent in all these things that come before giving. because the ground isn't as fertile as it used to be. I'm sorry to be a little bit of a downer, but I think it's reality.
No, I would agree with that, and I think that the boards and bosses put these unrealistic pressures on, right? With budgets, that you have to have a certain budget by a certain date. So you always see on campaigns at the end of the year that this is kind of my pet peeve, that it's the end of the year, December 31st is coming, last chance to make a donation. Really? You want to accept a donation from me in January? So it's all kind of false urgency that's there. And I think that a lot of time boards and bosses don't give enough ramp room, where if you want to get a transaction, if I want $100 from someone, that's easy to do. But if I want 100,000 from someone, that's going to take a relationship, and that's going to take some time unless they're an existing donor.
Although there is a flip side, which is how do you report on that work back to the board?
Right.
To show that, yes, the money's not in the bank yet, but we're leading up to it. And yes, it's taking long, but it's actually worth it because you get the 100K, not, the kind of the throwaway gift. So I see everybody's perspective there. And it's just harder to report on. It's just very easy to see how much money's in the bank. Is there more than yesterday? Yes or no? Are we meeting the goal? That's kind of how do you report on, well, we're working with these 100 prospects and we're at this stage of the relationship and these are the next steps. And so I was, when I was at Hopkins, my boss or my boss's boss or the boss of my boss's boss, like there's so many levels there, actually did this exercise with the board of my unit, which the board chair had expressed, lack of trust, lack of belief that work was happening. And they put this long list. There's 1,000 prospects we're working on. We're at this stage with every one of them. But again, more work. Really, I totally get why people feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, and the reality is even if you had those 100 or 1,000, they all aren't going to give, right? So sometimes you're dealing with a donor and trying to foster that relationship, and you've spent 2 or 3 years worth of time on it, and it goes nowhere. And that's life, right? It happens in every other profession.
Yeah, and so then it becomes so it's kind of more of a statistical thing, no? And maybe it's more a matter of principle. Like we need to have the right principles, do the right things, and we trust, a faith component here, that it works out in the end. I found that it does work out. I mean, you when you work with clients, I'm sure you find that, right? But from the perspective of the board member who just joined and has experience in another line of business, it's very easy to poo-poo ideas, and just say, I think it's fun.
But Louis, I really just wanted to thank you for taking the time to be part of this podcast. If folks wanted to get hold of you or to learn more about the Donor Participation Project, how would they go about doing that?
It's pretty easy. Just I'm going to give you a web address, a URL. So it's join DPP. So JOIN and then DPP for Donor Participation Project. JoinDPP.com. And there's a sign up there. If you want to connect personally with me, please seek me out on LinkedIn, and I'd be excited to connect with folks. Jack, I want to thank you for your persistence and for how easy you have made this interview. I wish we were all like that, and it's been absolutely wonderful. I've been kind of following you. I saw when you had Lynn Wester and Jim Langley, some folks that I really admire.
Yes.
And some kind of other folks that I didn't know about that are really interesting.
Thank you so much, Louis, and have a great weekend.
Thanks so much.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.